Hey everyone, it's Anthony from Pretty Printer here. In today's video, I'm going to make what you see on the screen here come alive. So basically, this app is going to allow you to see the current weather in various cities that you add to the database using this little form up here. So I'll be creating this app in Django, and this is the template that I'm going to be modifying to be dynamic through Django. So before I get started, I just want to let you know that I have a free course on my website, Django Database Essentials, where you can learn how to use various parts of the model system in Django. You can check that out after you watch this video on my website at prettyprinter.com. And if you don't remember that address, you can click on the link in the description below. So I'll have all the code for this video in the description below as well, including this starting file. And one other thing you should know is we're going to use the Open Weather Map API, so you'll have to sign up for that if you want to work along with me. So I have an environment set up already, and I have Django installed. So what I'll do is I'll start a project. So Django, let's see, where's my Django admin start project. Now I'll call this the weather. Not the most creative name, but that's what I have. So I'll change into that directory, and then I'll start by creating an app as well. So Python manage.py start app, and I'll call the app weather because, whoops, that's not what I wanted. So start app weather, and I'll just delete the directory where I messed up. Okay, so the app is going to be called weather because this app's only going to do one thing, which is get the weather. So the first thing I'll do is I will open up the files. So I'll drag this into VS Code. And what I'll do here is I will add the app to the project. So settings, and I'll go over to installed apps and add weather, just like that. And I'll be keeping all of the other settings as the default. And then what I'll do is I'll create a super user. Well, I need to migrate first. So Python manage.py migrate. And then Python manage.py create super user. Anthony will be the username, prettyprinter.com. It's the email. I'll enter a password. Okay, so I have my super user. So what I'll do is I'll start up the app just to make sure everything is working correctly. So I'll run the server, go to the page, and go to the admin dashboard and make sure I can log in. So username Anthony, and then password is going to be password 11 with a capital P. Log in. Okay, so everything there is fine. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get that template into the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this and then paste it inside of the app. I need to create a directory called templates. And then inside of that directory, I'll create a directory called weather, which matches the name of the app. And here I'll paste the weather template in there. So now I'll be able to look at it here, and we see that's exactly what I want. So the next thing I want to do is I want to actually view this page when I go to the index. So for right now, when I go to the index, I get the congratulations page telling me that Django has been, or the project has installed correctly. So what I'll do is I will first update the URLs here. I'll add another path for the index. So I won't put anything in there because I don't want an additional endpoint. And then I'll use include, which I have to import from Django.urls. So include. And then I'm going to include weather.urls, which is a file that I'm going to create in just a second here. So actually, I'll use this as a base. And then inside of my weather app, I'll create urls.py. And then I'll paste that there and remove the things that aren't necessary. Okay, so now I'm going to import all my views. So from period import views. And I'm going to create a view called index in a moment. It doesn't actually exist yet, but it will in just a second. So views.index. Now I'll go to that views file and create that index view. So it takes in requests, of course. And then I'm going to return that template. So I need to pass request to render, and I also need to pass the name of the template. So in this case, the name is weather/weather.html. So that should be enough. So if I go back here, and is my app running? It failed because I saved before I created that URLs file. So let's try that again. And now I can see the template being rendered through my app instead of just as a plain HTML file. So now what I want to do is I want to make this kind of come alive. So to do that, I'm going to call the API, and let me drag in the URL for this. So looking at the documentation, here is an example of the call. So basically it's their URL/data/the version. And then I'm looking for the weather. And then the query takes in the name of a city. So this example has London, or you can pass in the country as well. So London, UK. And also I want to use Fahrenheit as the units, but you can use Kelvin, which is the default, or you can use Celsius if you choose to do so. But I'll be using Fahrenheit for this tutorial. So here inside of the index, I'll just put URL here as URL. So this is just the API URL. So once you sign up for Open Weather Map, you'll get an API key. So you just pass that app ID into your URL and you'll be able to access their API. If you don't pass them the API key, then you won't be able to access it. Here you see I have units as imperial, meaning I will get Fahrenheit as the temperature. And then the Q here is actually a placeholder because that is the city that I'm going to query for. So I'm going to just set the city variable equal to Las Vegas for now. That's where I live. And later I'll make it pull from the database, but just to test things out, I'll set the city to be equal to Las Vegas. And now what I need to do is I need to install requests so I can actually send a request to this URL. So I'm going to run pip inv install and then requests. That should only take a moment. And here I'll import it. So import requests. And while that runs, I'll just type in requests get URL format, pass in the city, and then I'll assign this to be R short for response. And what I'll do is I'll print out r.text, meaning the output of that response. So if I run my server again, and if I go to my index again, it should run, but I get an error. It tells me that the request does not have an attribute called get. And that's because I didn't use the S on the end. That should be request, not request. So let me run that again. And it works. So if I go to my console, I see the data here that I'm looking for. So I just printed it out. That's why we can see it here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to pass this data to the template. Well, I want to pass the relevant data because a lot of this data I won't be using, but there is some data that is pretty important. So basically looking at this, I need the name of the city. I need the temperature in Fahrenheit. I need a description of the weather, and I need the icon. So the icon, the temperature, and the description come from the API. And then the city, of course, comes from my app. So I will create a dictionary that represents all of that information. I'll call this city weather. It's going to be a dictionary. And for my request, I'm going to call .json on this. So it converts the result of the request into a JSON object. Or I should say it will interpret the response as a JSON object and convert it into a combination of Python dictionaries and Python lists. So JSON objects can be easily represented by dictionaries and lists in Python. So that's what .json is doing. So there are 4 things that I said I want. I want the city. I want the temperature. I want the description of the weather there. And finally, I want the icon. So the icon is actually something that's hosted on their site. So as long as you supply the right icon code, then you will get the correct icon. So these shouldn't be strings. I'll remove that. And since I have this R here, that is what I want. I'll take away that print statement. So R is now a Python dictionary. And the city is actually coming from the city variable. The temperature is going to come from R, and then it's going to be main, I believe. So let me look here. I'm looking for main, yeah. And then inside of main, I'm looking for temp. So main, and then temp. And then for the description, this is a list, I believe. So weather. And then it's going to be a list with one item in it. So if I go to weather, where is weather? Here we go. So a list with one item. We see here the description, clear sky. So weather, first item in the list, and then description. And that will give me the description of the current weather. And then I want the icon, which is going to be pretty much the same thing, except for instead of description, I'm going to have the word icon. So now let me just print this out to make sure everything looks okay. And refresh the page. And my app doesn't want to restart correctly. So let me try that again. And run this. And we see the description has updated to broken clouds. The temperature is 88.38. The city is Las Vegas, and the icon is 04D. So now let's pass all of that information over to the template. So I'll remove the print statement. I'll create a context variable, and I'll just call this city weather, and then I'll pass in the actual dictionary there. And then I'll pass context to the template, open up the template. And then I need to replace the things that need to be updated. So in this particular case, this is going to be, let's see, a city weather dot city. So this is just using everything I created in that dictionary, city weather. So city weather dot temperature, city underscore weather dot description. And then finally the icon here, I have the URL. So basically you modify this part in the URL to use the icon code. So city weather dot icon. There we go. So now if I refresh the page, this should be a little different because it is not 29 degrees. There are no thunderstorms right now, and it's not raining. So if I refresh this, we see now we have the picture of the sun, which means clear sky usually. We get the actual temperature, 89.56, and then we have clear sky as the description. And of course, the city is the same because I'm using a different city. If I change this, all I need to change is one thing. So instead of Las Vegas as a city, if I said London and then ran it, it should give me the weather for London. So I get London as the word here. It's 47.39 degrees Fahrenheit in London. It's hazy, and then it has this picture of what I assume to be haze. I've never seen that kind of picture before for weather, but then again, we've never had haze in Las Vegas as a description as far as I can remember. So you can see that just by changing the name of the city, everything else works because, you know, you're calling the API with that new city, and then it's just simply supplying that return data in this dictionary and passing it to the template. So this is nice, but this only works for one city at a time. If I want to display multiple cities, then I need a way to, one, represent multiple cities, and two, kind of loop over all those cities and perform a request for each one to get the weather for each city. So to do that, I'm going to create a table in the database. And that table is going to be very simple. So let's go to models, and we'll call this city. And the whole point of this table is to allow me to store a bunch of city names in the table. So it's going to have a single useful column, so name, and then it's going to be a char field. And we'll give the max length as 25. And then I'll define a stir method on it. And we'll just return self.name. And then finally, I need to define a meta class. And this is just so the plural of city will be cities with IES instead of S. So it's just a little visual thing when you're using the admin dashboard. So that's just verbose underscore name underscore plural. Just like that. And then I want this to be cities, because by default it's cities like that, but I want it to be correct. So I'll make the cities like that. So now what I need to do is I need to make migrations. And then I'm going to migrate. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to add this to the admin dashboard. So admin.site register, and then the name of the model, which I'll import from models. Just like that. And I'm going to run the server so I can look at the admin dashboard. So Python manage py run server. And then I'll go to the admin dashboard and I see cities here. So what I'll do now is I'll add a few cities. Los Angeles, Tokyo, and one more, let's say Melbourne, if I can spell it correctly. There we go. Okay, so 3 cities. And now what I want to do is I want to actually query for those cities. So if I go back to the homepage, what I expect to see is the weather for each of those 3 cities that I have. So to do that, I need to first query the database for all the cities that I have. So inside of views here, what I'll do is I'll just add the query here. So cities is going to be equal to city objects all. And of course, I need to import city from models. So from models, import city. And with the cities, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over it and do something for each city. So for city in cities, I'm going to do something. And that something is actually the same thing that I'm doing here. So I'll just indent everything so it goes inside of the loop. And what I want to do is I want to get the weather for each city and append it to a list. So I'll call this list weather data. And here at the bottom, I'm going to append this city weather dictionary that I create for each city. Just like that. So what it's doing is it's going to loop over all the cities that I have in the database. And for each one, it's going to query the API. The data that gets returned is going to be put into this dictionary called city weather. And that city weather dictionary is going to be appended to my weather data list. And then it starts over and it kind of starts from scratch with the next city. And then it's going to append that city to the list. So if I have 3 cities in the database, then this list that I have will end up being a list of 3 elements. So once I have that, let me try printing this out. So print weather data. So this won't work correctly the first time, but you see it's just one city, Melbourne. But if I look at the print, I see 3 things inside of the list. And I see a minor problem here. It says the city is actually an object instead of the name of the city. So that's an easy change. If I go here, instead of city, is going to be city.name. Because I don't want to pass the object, I want to pass the name inside of the object that represents each city. Just a minor difference there. The object is something that you work with in Python. The name is something that you're actually displaying to the user. So now instead of passing city weather, I'm going to pass weather data to the template. And then I'll go into my template again. And when I'm looping over something like this, I want to find out where the HTML repeats because I want to have that HTML be inside of my loop. So in this case, it's the box that I need to create multiple times. So each city gets its own box. So for city in weather data. And, you know, just for consistency purposes, so I don't have to change anything here, I use the same variable. So for city weather in weather data. And then I need to find the end of this box, which is right here in 4. And now if I run this, it should work correctly. So now we see I have the 3 cities that I'm interested in. I can't verify the weather in any of those cities because I'm not there, but you see that it's different for each one. So in LA, it's 75 degrees, Tokyo, 65 degrees, in Melbourne, it is 70. And you see they all have clear skies, which is nice. It's good that there's nice weather all around the world right now. So the last major thing that I want to do is I want to allow the user to actually type in a city here and add it. That way I don't have to go into the admin dashboard and add the cities myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my app and create a new file called forms.py. And inside of forms, I'm going to say from Django.forms import. I want to import model form because my form is basically the same as the model. So I'm only concerned with the name of the city. So I don't need to create a custom form. I can just create a form based off that model. And then I know I need to import text input because I need to do something with it. And then I'm going to say from models import city, and I'll go ahead and create the form. So class is going to be city form. It's going to be a model form. And then I need to define the meta class so I can assign the model to be city. And then the fields that I'm interested in are only name, so just one field. And then I'll use text input in a second when I show you what goes wrong. So now what I want to do is I'll go back to views, and now I have to start thinking of the 2 cases that I'll have when I'm doing this. I'm going to have a case where they are just viewing the page, and I'm going to have a case where they are saving a new city to the database. So they're actually hitting the submit button. So in the case where they hit the submit button, what I want to do is I want to save whatever they enter into the database and then return the same screen with basically the same information. So to do that, all I need to do is think about, where to place this logically. So really the main case that I'm concerned with is when it's a post request. Everything else is going to be the same after I save the data. So method or request.method post, and then I'm going to do something here. And I can take away the city, by the way, because I'm no longer using that directly. So I'll input or import from forms, import city form. And what I want to do is I'm going to instantiate this form. So form equals city form. And I'm putting this under the if request.method equals post because I want this form to be blank even after they submit it. So if I set this to be in its own block where, it's a GET request, then anytime they submit a city, it will leave that city in the form when the page reloads. And that's not something I want. I want the form to kind of restart every time they submit. So that's why I'm doing that here. It may be a little confusing when I explain it, but if you actually tried it in the code, you'll discover what I mean by this. You'll see that it doesn't reset the city. So this is what it looks like when I pass the form. So form is form, and then in the template, I'll find the form that I have. So basically it's just one single input, and this A should be a button. So let me update that. And it's going to be type submit. So type submit, just like that. And then I'm going to pass in the input from Django forms. So form dot name. So let's take a look at that. And I get the input under my original one, but it doesn't look like my original one because it's missing the class input and the placeholder as well. So that's why I use the text widget here. So I'll define widgets here, and by doing this, I'll get access to the widget for the name. So it's going to be a text input, and really all I want to do is add a couple of attributes. So one is the class. So the class is input, And then 1 is the placeholder. The placeholder is going to be, let me copy, city name, just like that. So I'll paste that there, and then I'll refresh, take a look at it. And we see it now matches the style of the original input. So I'll remove the original input because I won't be using that one. So let me just take that one away. And now I should be able to submit my form. And it tells me that CSRF verification failed. So what I need to do is I need to add the CRSF token, just like that. And then when I try this again, and I'm missing something really obvious. Let me think about it for just a second. Should have the token there. Oh, I misspelled it. It's hard pronouncing acronyms like that. Okay, so yeah, it's CSRF, not CRSF. Minor mistake. Okay. So we see the weather is changing a little bit in these cities. I'm guessing clouds are just moving over the cities. That's why you see now there's broken clouds and overcast clouds in those cities. And if I submit the form, nothing happens. But if I want to see that data, let's see, views, I'm going to print requests.post. So now I'll just type in some gibberish, hit add city, and now I see that gibberish here that I typed in. So now the last thing I want to do to get that working is I can use the functionality that model form gives me. So first I need to instantiate the form using the request data, so city form, and then requests.post. And then form.save will both validate it and save it to the database at the same time. So form.save. So now this should be it. So if I add another city in here, I'll use my original city, Las Vegas. Then what I expect to happen is after I click this button, the page will refresh and I will see 4 cities in here with Las Vegas being one of the 4. So add city. And that's exactly what I see. I see Las Vegas has been added to the end of the list. If I add one more city, Toronto, we see Toronto is now there. So that's all I wanted to do in this app. Of course, there's so much more you can do. You can make it to where you can delete cities if you want. You can add in more weather information or anything that you can think of for this app. There are so many different ways that you can modify it. And like I said, I'll include the code for this in the description below as well, so you can try it out yourself. So if you have any questions about this, make sure you leave a comment down below and I will get to it. Like I said, check out my free course on my website, Django Database Essentials. I'll link to it in the description below. And last thing is, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time.